Hello and welcome to My Week in Baseball. I'm your host, Phil Estruth Harrison. You're listening to Season 3, Episode 8. All episodes are available in both video and podcast format at myweekinbaseball.com or subscribe on YouTube at My Week in Baseball. As always, a couple of acknowledgments. First, to Rose Petal Studios for the artwork and logos created for this show. To view more, visit rosepetalstudios.com. And second, thanks to Brunjo Productions for our intro music. Learn more at brunjo.com. Well, today we've got two players with the same name, Aaron Judge and the unusual walk, something unique about Blake Snell's no-hitter, and the book, The New York Game by Kevin Baker. Of course, we'll also have a timely Blimerick, our baseball limerick, and our blast from the past along the way. So let's get right to it. We'll begin with today's trivia question. Who were the two players on the 1988 Detroit Tigers with the same name? Part 2 of that question is, how could you tell them apart? Well, here's a hint. The answer is a little obscure, but don't go looking it up just yet. We'll have the answer shortly. Next up, Aaron Judge and the unusual walk. Now, Judge is having a fabulous year for the New York Yankees. As of today, which this is being recorded on August 12, 2024, as of today, Judge is batting .328 with 42 home runs and 106 runs batted in just 117 games. That is nearly 1 RBI per game. And according to my calculations, he's on a pace to hit 57 home runs and drive in 145. So that's fantastic. Oh, and his OPS plus, his on-base plus slugging compared to league average, 219. That means he's more than twice as good as the average hitter. I mean, he's at 219, right? 119 is a good hitter, but 219, wow. Anyway, it's by far the best OPS plus in baseball, even above his teammate Juan Soto, who's number 2, and Shohei Ohtani, who comes in at number 3. So by comparison, let's drop down 100 points. So Judge is 219. That's his OPS plus, 219% above average. By comparison, let's just look at a player who's 119 OPS plus, just an ordinary 19% above league average. And you'll get exactly these two catchers this year, 2024, and that is Adley Rutschman of the Baltimore Orioles and Cal Raleigh of the Seattle Mariners. These are both good players, and you would not mind having them on your team at all. Good offensive players, but still. Anyway, that's the kind of season that Aaron Judge is having. So on to today's topic, which really is not about Judge in particular, but about the unusual walk given to him. So back on August 3rd, after hitting a home run in the first inning against the Blue Jays, Judge comes to bat again in the second inning. You mentioned they've already gone through the order once. He's coming to bat again in the second inning. The Yanks are leading at the time 4-1, and there are 2 outs. But here's an unusual part about it. You know, usually when you intentionally walk somebody, there's a runner probably on second. First base is open, something like that. And often there's less than 2 outs, right? You're hoping to set up a double play. Here's the unusual thing. There's already 2 outs, and the bases are empty. That's the situation. The next batter up was the Yanks catcher Austin Wells. Well, Austin Wells isn't really too bad. He's batting but just 12% above league average in comparison, right? So if you're the pitcher, who would you rather face? Aaron Judge at 219 OPS plus, who has just hit a home run against you an inning earlier, or Austin Wells, who's just 12% above league average. Anyway, the Toronto pitcher is Jose Barrios, and he does issue the intentional walk to Judge in this situation. But it doesn't work out exactly as planned because Austin Wells then singles. But since the next batter strikes out, Toronto does escape the inning without any further damage. And I'm sure this call also comes from the dugout. Probably the pitcher on his own is not making this call, but still pretty unusual. And the Blue Jays do end up losing the game anyway, 8-3, so it kind of doesn't end up mattering. These types of walks are certainly rare, but I was a little surprised to learn that they do happen occasionally. In fact, it did happen to Judge just a season ago, so it does happen once in a while. It's sometimes referred to as getting the Barry Bonds treatment, because clearly Bonds hit a ton of home runs, set all kinds of records, and was intentionally walked very many times, but never in a situation quite like this. So congrats to Aaron Judge and the Yankees on the tremendous season he's having, and of course on his unusual walk. Next up, Blake Snell and the no-hitter. Back on August 2, Blake Snell of the San Francisco Giants threw his very first no-hitter. And as you may remember, he's previously won two Cy Young Awards, including just last year. Well, in this particular game, Snell tossed 114 pitches, which is second from his career high, which is 3 walks and 11 strikeouts for the game, and beat the Cincinnati Reds 3-0. This, of course, is a great feat, and it's done so seldom, even by the very best pitchers. But the unique thing about Snell's game is this. It was a no-hitter, yes, but for Blake Snell, the very first complete game of his career. We're talking about a 2-time Cy Young Award winner who's played 9 seasons, started more than 200 games, and pitched nearly 1,100 innings. Never a complete game until now. By comparison, Clayton Kershaw, another lefty, had won 3 Cy Youngs in his first 9 seasons, and at that time, he already had 24 complete games. And in the case of Justin Verlander, in his first 9 full seasons, he won the Cy Young just once, but he managed still 20 complete games. Of course, these totals are far below players from previous eras because the game has changed, but still, just 1 complete game for Blake Snell in 9 seasons. He doesn't go deep into games. He pitches a lot of 6 and 7 inning games and even some 5 inning games. But when he does pitch, those innings are excellent quality innings. He strikes out a ton. He tends to walk a lot of guys, but he's very good in the time he has used. And I think that's what the Giants were looking for, and that's what they got. And I'm going to say congrats to Blake Snell, because a no-hitter is remarkable, and he is a terrific pitcher. And congratulations to the Giants for having the wherewithal to sign him and stick with him after an injury-riddled first half to the season. He's certainly pitching like a Cy Young Award winner now. So that brings us to our Blimerick, our baseball limerick that we have every episode. And this time it's a tribute to Blake Snell. So here we go. Pitching 9 innings it takes to complete a game with high stakes. A no-hitter he threw. Cy Youngs he has 2. Blake Snell with the Giants, he rakes. Next, a little about the book, The New York Game by Kevin Baker. Well, it's the history of the early game that did not start in Cooperstown, New York, but it did get its beginnings in a slightly larger burg, that of New York City. And the author takes pains to tell you why. There's a lot of history here, and honestly, I am still reading it, but many of the names are familiar, even if some of the early teams you read about are not. And there's one strange fact that I learned. The Cincinnati Reds, or Redlegs, and the Boston Red Sox not only got their names from the same article of clothing, but in many cases, the same players who jumped ship to go to Boston for, can you guess? For more money. So that's how the Red Sox got their name, many players from the Reds moving to Boston, and the same name, the same color stockings were chosen. There's much more history about the city of New York and its now familiar boroughs of baseball, as well as early teams in other parts of the country. And you'll know some of the names like manager John McGraw and players like Christy Mathewson from a long past. Other great trivia I learned is that the team that eventually becomes the Yankees actually shared and leased a ballpark from the Giants, which was big revenue for the Giants, who kick them out, reasoning that, they'd be rid of them for one thing, rid of that other New York team, but partially because it was nearly impossible to get land approved for a ballpark in those days, and they knew it. So they thought they were getting rid of them, maybe for good. Doesn't work out that way. As the Yanks reinvest their profits in building a great team, while the formerly superior Giants go through a long malaise, while issuing their profits as dividends and then making untenable loans to people in team management. So it doesn't work out quite the way they expected, and they lose a huge amount of revenue because they're no longer leasing their stadium to another team. There's also a great chapter on the Yankees of the 1920s and the teams of Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. And here is another interesting fact that I got from the book. Baseball stats guru Bill James decided not to write a book about the greatest teams of all time because the answer was so incredibly obvious: the 1927 New York Yankees. So what would the point of the book have been? So I found that kind of fascinating. Anyway, the book, The New York Game, also includes much history about New York City itself and what's going on behind the scenes and all the politics in the background and some of the other leading characters of the city who aren't necessarily directly involved in baseball. There's also quite a lot about cheating in baseball, about games being thrown and players being in on the take. And there's one particular player that you'll read about who carries that aspect with him from team to team throughout his career. So even before you get to the 1919 Black Sox scandal, which this kind of all leads up to, even before though you get to that, it's going on. So it wasn't an unusual thing and something the game has always struggled with in keeping its integrity. So the book also includes the politics in general, but also what goes on behind the scenes in trying to get a city built. And interesting to me, if you don't pay off the right people, the right group of people, if you don't have the right connections, what happens to the big plot of land you're planning to build a stadium on? A trolley car might suddenly go through the middle of it, or a street gets built through the middle of it, and it's no longer this big contiguous block that you could build a park on. So those kind of things go back in time, the politics of getting a stadium built, even then. Anyway, I would say that if you know New York City, I think the book will mean more to you, as many of the references to specific places and areas it didn't resonate with me the way they probably would with someone who had more of a New York background. So I would say this: if you love history, you know the city, you love baseball, and you enjoy a long read, it's 475 pages, well, this is the book for you. It is an interesting story. Again, that's called The New York Game by Kevin Baker. Next up, our final topic becomes not only the answer to today's trivia question, but also our blast from the past. So if you remember the question, who were the two players on the 1988 Detroit Tigers with the same name, and for extra credit, how could you tell them apart? That was our question for today. And the answer is those two players were both named Billy Beane. Both of them played parts of 6 seasons during the same era, Both of them got a cup of coffee in Detroit as teammates on the 1988 Tigers, although I can't actually be certain they were on the club at the same moment in time because they each played very few games. One played like 6 games, another played about 10 games. So really, just that drink of coffee. And part 2, how could you tell them apart? Well, one spelled bean without an E on the end, and the other spelled bean with an E, so B-E-A-N or B-E-A-N-E. As to differences, the other one that's of note is that one was a left-handed hitter and the other a righty. But the similarities continue. So both Billy Beans played outfield and at least a little bit of first base, one a little more than the other. One of the Billy Beans batted .226, the other batted .219 for his career. One of them had an OPS plus of just 59 and the other 45, which of course is roughly half league average offensively. Remember, league average is 100, 59, 45, whoo! So as hitters, they were nearly identical production-wise, or should I say lack of production-wise. And therefore, there is no real reason, statistically, to mention which was which. But to put this in perspective for Tiger fans, talking about OPS of 59 or 45, which those are really abysmal, to put this in perspective, those OPS pluses are better than Javier Baez this season. And just slightly below Baez's production the 3 seasons that he's been in Detroit. I think that will be the topic for another broadcast. Will the Tigers DFA Javi Baez? I think that'll be a good question. He's owed a lot of money. He certainly can't hit anymore. His defense, But that'll be a topic for another day. Anyway, the reason I stumbled onto this is that Billy Bean, the one without an E on the end, and he was the right-handed hitter, recently passed away at age 60. He had worked for MLB as the Senior Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and was a special assistant to the Commissioner of Baseball. He brought topics to the clubhouse that needed to be heard and shared his own experiences as a player and a person. Now, the other Billy Bean, the one with an E, is still with us. He's 62 years old at the time of this recording, and he was the left-handed hitter. He's the one best known for changing the A's approach to baseball, which is the story told in the book and the movie Moneyball. As a player, he struggled, but he became a renowned GM and eventually was offered his dream job in Boston, but turned it down. So were you confused about Billy Bean and Billy Bean? I know I was, and I didn't realize there were 2 players with such stunning similarities until reading the obit. So condolences to the family and friends of Billy Bean. I hope I was able to clear things up just a bit. And that's all for today, my friends. Join us next time because honestly, what can be better than talking baseball? As always, I'm your host, Phil S. Truth Harrison. We'll see you next time on My Week in Baseball.